Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, that's good. You're listening to PHLY Flyers. That's right, PHLY. My name is Bill Matz. I'm your director of fun and games for the evening. With me, as always, Philadelphia's #1 hockey beat reporter, Charlie O'Connor.
Yeah, so funny story about this. This is the second time that we are both wearing Phillies jerseys. And while the first time we were both wearing the same Phillies jersey, the blue Bryce Harper jersey, this time we are wearing different jerseys, but of the same player, Rhys Hoskins. And did we plan either of them?
No.
We sure didn't.
No, I didn't. I walked in, I came out of the bathroom after you got here, your back's turned to me, and I just see 17 Hoskins. I was like, we've done it again.
Sure have.
We have done it again. We are, once again, matching, and hopefully it's the same result.
Certainly hope so.
Nice victory for the Phils. I just, watching everything that has unfolded, not just in the games and in these playoff series for the Phils, man. The Twitter wars and the fans just absolutely pounding their chest, the threats against Blooper, everything that has gone on, it just gets me so pumped for a time when this is our hockey team. I just cannot imagine what happens when, like, the Penguin has something to say. Because Gritty is a homicide. Like,
yeah, he's already that.
Yeah, like, the Fanatic is a family-friendly, like, we have to pick up the mantle for the Fanatic. He's not going to say anything.
True.
Gritty might punch someone.
Yeah.
Like, he's done it before.
Yeah.
He's assaulted a child.
I forgot about that.
Remember? Not even the kids on the ice. He allegedly punched a kid. That was apparently made up, but I don't know. I just really look forward to a time where it's the team we're doing this. Of course, you are picking up the Phillies slack here at PHLY. You are their beat reporter right now.
A little bit. Not quite a beat reporter.
Not quite the beat reporter, but you're doing some writing about the Phils. But, man, when this is the Flyers, it's... We just got to wait. Just got to wait a little longer, I guess.
Hopefully just a little longer.
Just looking at, like, the fervor for this team, this Phillies team, it was a lot of fun, 07 to 11. But these... Like, there weren't fans prior to that. Like, listen, there wasn't this huge fan base for the Phils, and it grew from there.
Sure.
And then that, 10-year drought just, like, made us froth at the mouth.
Yeah.
And now these last 2 seasons, we are the most insane fan base. Like, it is now the Eagles fan base has moved to also baseball. Like, this is how we act at baseball too. I'm very much looking forward to the day it encapsulates hockey again because... Damn, dude, what's going on right now? How could you not want to be a part of this thing?
No, it'll be fun. And yeah, hopefully they're on the right track. Obviously, no one's expecting it to be this year or even next year or even the year after that. But, maybe
I think the year
4
after,
or 5 years, brighter days could be upon us.
I think the year after next. I think it could be a year before Michkov gets here. And then when he gets here, it's real. Okay, now they're contenders. That's my hope, at least.
I mean, Bill, that would be a blast. I would love that.
All right. So last we spoke, we were waiting to see what this team would do, and they eventually put Wade Allison on waivers. We were thinking maybe they were a little hesitant to do that. He kind of penciled in as the 13th forward, and even then, you still... But do we want to lose him for nothing potentially? Well, he clears waivers, and I guess that's a weight off of all of our shoulders. But is this a matter of us maybe overrating Wade Allison, or was the timing right? Like, I asked, why do it now on Friday rather than like yesterday or today? What would be? There are still some teams trimming down, like. You talked about a team getting down to 30 on Friday. It was like, well, the Flyers are at 25. Like, how is this? Did they time it right? Or is it just we think more of Wade Allison because we've seen him up close? There's a lot of Wade Allisons out there, actually. What do you think it is?
I guess objectively speaking, we did overrate him because we both thought he was going to get claimed, and he didn't. That said, to me, I mean, part of the reason why I was thinking it was more likely than not he was going to get claimed, I don't think it was necessarily because I was overrating him. It was because, number one, you just said every team has a Wade Allison. And that is true in a sense, in that every team has a guy in his mid-20s, a former sort of top prospect, but not quite, who hasn't quite established himself as a clear-cut NHL contributor. Yes, every team has one or two of those guys, to be sure. However, my thing was that Wade Allison, in terms of his skill set, is pretty unique in that not every team has a guy with power forward potential who is big, can skate well in a straight line, plays physical. Really, it's kind of like the wet dream of a lot of traditional NHL GMs. I mean, he plays with that edge, with heart, with fire. And to me, I looked at him as a guy that at least one NHL GM would convince himself that I can make something out of this guy, because he's not like the small 5'10" scorer he's not the Jordan Wheel. He's the kind of guy where NHL GMs, in my estimation, were going to really be intrigued by him. And maybe they were, but clearly they weren't intrigued enough to pass the opportunity of giving one of their own guys a shot. I think, if anything, that's probably what we overrate or underrate, to be accurate, is teams know their own guys. They know what they have, and they get excited about their own guys the same way we get excited about a Wade Allison. And while they may be intrigued by Wade Allison, they may look at it as, you know what, we developed 3 other guys that we saw from the start, that our scouts liked from 5 years ago when we drafted them. And if claiming Wade Allison means we can't actually give that guy a shot this year, then it's not worth claiming Wade Allison, because we just have more invested in the guy we developed from start to finish. We know him better than we know Wade Allison, and we'd rather give him the shot than Wade. And if I had to guess, if there were any teams, and I suspect there were at least a few teams that had a legitimate conversation about whether Wade Allison was the guy they wanted to claim, I bet those teams ultimately decided they wanted to see what they had in their own guys before they tried plucking somebody that the Flyers, who aren't a great team already, decided wasn't good enough for their roster.
And that's something I saw go around so much, like, oh yeah, big shock that the guy who couldn't make this awesome Flyers team, no one else wanted him. It's like, well, it's not as if that's how, that's not how rosters are constructed.
No.
It's not like an NHL video game power ranking. Okay, well, this guy's an 86 and this guy's an 85, so the 86 makes it. Like, it's about fit and the personality of the player and the coach. And, like, is Bobby Brink more ready than Wade Allison right now? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it's, all right, but he fits the future. And since this is a rebuild, 26-year-old Wade Allison isn't exactly our top priority. Now, speaking of Brink, like we talked, and he could end up making this team. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes until rosters are official at 5:00.
Yes.
But we said, okay, if he doesn't make it, he has probably played himself into first call-up potential. Yeah. Whereas it was maybe coming into camp, it was like he's down on the list of dudes. And now, all right, he's moved himself up. We've also heard, Samu Tuamala coming in. Probably further down on the list, has played himself up. The coach has raved about him.
Absolutely.
Where is Wade Allison on that list now? Do you think he's first call-up guy? Is he going to take some convincing? Is he going to have to kill it in the AHL? Are they like kind of, because they waived him, they brought the possibility of just giving him away? Is he down on the list? Do you think he could be a first call-up? Where do you think he fits in the organizational depth chart?
Well, what I'll say is that I think at least right now he's pretty high, because they know he can hang in the NHL. They know he's good enough. They also have seen him down in the AHL before, and he's pretty much thrived at that level, so it shouldn't be a problem. However, I do think that a lot of it is going to come down to his attitude down there. Like, I'll equate this with a guy last year who isn't on the team anymore, but had the same thing happen to him, Zach McEwen. Zach McEwen, if you remember, got waived. It was kind of a surprise waive at the end of the year. Not that, I think Wade Allison is a better player than McEwen, but it was the same kind of thing where you thought McEwen was going to make the team.
Yeah.
And then he kind of got boxed out. They had signed Nick Delorier, so they no longer, McEwen was no longer the only fighter on the team, and McEwen got waived.
I so badly wanted to see them play together.
The Bash Brothers.
I just wanted
They did play together a little bit after, but again, after he got called back up. Well, what happened was, and this is what I've heard from multiple people in the organization, Torts was the main mouthpiece of it, but it wasn't just him. Like, this was the general consensus was that McEwen went down, and he honestly worked his ass off. He didn't sulk. He didn't, lament his, the injustice of it all, that he's an NHL player and he should be up there and this is ridiculous. He went down there and he worked hard and he did his job. And then when there was an injury, he came back up. And then he honestly looked pretty good the first few games he got called back up. And I think, will Wade Allison be a top injury call-up? Probably. But if he goes down there and just pouts, then when there's an injury, maybe Ian LaPerriere, when they give Ian a call and say, "Hey, Lappy, who can you call up immediately?" He'll be like, "I don't want to send Wade up. He's been dogging it in practice. He has a bad attitude." And then maybe Wade Allison isn't the first call. But I think if Allison takes this in a positive way, and look, no one's saying Wade Allison has to be happy about this. Wade Allison shouldn't.
No, he shouldn't be happy.
He should be pissed about this.
Yeah.
He should be like, "No, I'm an NHL player, and I'm going to prove to them down there that I am way too good for the AHL." If he goes in with that attitude, works his tail off, scores a couple goals in the first couple games down there, then I absolutely think he'll be first on the list. And I still can envision a scenario, because he's still on this team, he's still in the organization. I can envision a scenario where he has a good year in the NHL for the Flyers. It just clearly isn't going to happen right off the bat.
And that's just what's going to come down to for Wade is, can he continue to build his stock back up?
Yeah.
Like that's just what it's going to be. I guess the biggest question now that I believe the count is 24.
Yes.
We are currently at 24 guys. That's with 3 goaltenders. Felix Sandstrom still here. Why?
Yeah, I'll say I did expect that they were going to waive because Felix Sandstrom isn't waiver exempt. He needs to clear waivers to be sent down. That's why yesterday there were a ton of guys on waivers, because everyone who teams need to get off their roster in order to be at the 23-man limit or be under the cap, whichever is their main, really it's both, but whichever is their main restriction, their main reason why they have to, their main way to get compliant. That's why all those guys got waived. Felix Sandstrom was not waived, which means that Felix Sandstrom, just by league rules, will be on the initial 23-man roster for the first day of the league year. So he's a lock. He's in. However, we know from John Tortorella's comments last week that Carter Hart's obviously the number 1. Sam Ersson has been told he is the number 2 and has been preparing for the season as if he's the number 2. I interviewed him on Friday and had a conversation with him about being the number 2. They are not if they're lying to us, they're also lying to Ersson, because Ersson is very happy about the fact that he is the backup goalie, and Felix Sandstrom is on the organizational depth chart the number 3. Now, could they theoretically keep 3 goalies? Yes, they could. However, most teams don't, for obvious reasons. You can only dress 2 in a game, and Felix Sandstrom, presumably, you want him playing. I mean, he might not be a prospect anymore, but if you have him, you might as well play him down in the minors.
They didn't want to play him last year when he was the backup.
Yeah.
They're going to play him now as the 3?
Exactly. So what it seems like, based on what you hear around the league, what it seems like kind of has this whole goalie situation, and this isn't just for the Flyers. There are a few other teams that are in this spot too. They're basically all trying to keep their goalies for as long as possible, because no one wants to be the team that Tampa poaches a goalie from off waivers while Andrei Vasilevsky is injured and out for quite a while. Now, I understand this to a point, because I get it. Flyers don't want to lose a goalie for nothing. Sandstrom is at least a decent pro-level goalie. Whether he's a decent NHL goalie, I'm skeptical, but you never know. I get you don't want to lose an asset for nothing. I understand that. However, I really don't think Tampa is going to claim Felix Sandstrom.
The level, if Felix Sandstrom plays half the games for the Tampa Bay Lightning between now and Christmas, because that's about when Vasilevsky might be back, they will miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
In order to protect him, this is a team that's aging. We know the injury issues they've had. The regular season doesn't mean what it did to them when they were chasing down the Detroit Red Wings a couple of years ago. And that was evidence they got swept in the first round. And then the following couple of years, they go to the Stanley Cup final. This is a team whose legacy will be made. They are worried about the postseason.
Yeah.
The level at which they would have to play in front of Felix Sandstrom to keep themselves in that division is far higher than I think they want to commit themselves the first 2-3 months of the season.
It's looking like a pretty good division. I mean, the only team in that division that is probably going to be bad is Montreal. Everyone else is going to be at least decent.
Yes, it's a very good division. Boston might be on the outside looking in if they don't have the start that they're there's no way Felix Sandstrom is part of their thought process, is there?
Yeah, and Again, as I said, I understand it. I'm sure that the Carter Hart situation probably plays into this a little bit, in that they worry that if they find out 2 weeks into the year that report gets released and Hart's included and he's suspended for the year or whatever, they don't want to have their goalie depth be depleted. That said, this is part of the reason why you were willing to take on the contract of Cal Peterson. Cal Peterson is your insurance. He is your guy who can at least play in the NHL. Now, whether he can play well or not, again, open discussion. But no one's going to claim him because of his contract. Obviously, he already cleared waivers last week because no one wants to pick up a $5 million a year goalie who might not even be an NHL goalie. I don't understand why they're being so protective of Felix Sandstrom, given the fact that they didn't even really give him like a serious shot at winning the job. Like, if anything, the job, based on the guys who got playing time in preseason, the battle was really between Erson and Peterson. Sandstrom got
Peterson
2
play?
periods.
No, okay, this is over.
Yeah, okay, it's Erson. That's what it is. So it's kind of surprising to me how careful they're being with Sandstrom, especially given how cavalier they were being with Allison. The only explanation I can think of is that they just have intel that there is a team that really, really likes Felix Sandstrom, and they're doing their best to hide him.
I guess, like, if it's Tampa, I would look at the better run teams and be like, yeah, we don't see it in Felix Sandstrom. Also, we're always wrong. And Tampa gets this shit right constantly. That said, they did claim Donnie Martell, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
But like, Tampa, far better run organization than the Flyers. Hopefully that changes in the years to come. We're going to talk about the new era of Orange in Charlie's piece, where he interviewed Hilferty and Jonesy in a little bit. But I guess it's like, man, if they claim Sandstrom and he has a .915 save percentage in his 20 starts, we're going to look real damn stupid.
Yeah.
Is that is that part of it? You don't want to look dumb?
I mean, maybe.
Like,
I really think it's more about asset management than anything else, I think.
Like, I've seen Wade Allison play at this level. He's an NHL player. I have seen Felix Sandstrom play at this level. Probably not. They were willing to potentially lose one for the other, and I talked maybe they had the timing right where it was, teams with where their rosters are at, they're just not going to take that risk, and there's at least one team in the league right now that doesn't have a goalie. So I guess, but I don't see a world in which Felix Sandstrom is at the top of anyone's list.
That's really where I'm at. But this is what they're doing.
How do you not just go with what you have?
So regardless, we now know that Felix Sandstrom is going to be on the 23-man roster.
Yes.
They have to get down to 23 by 5 p.m. today. They currently have 24. Now, there's a couple routes they can take here. The first route, which would be the easy one, and this is the one that, if I had to bet, I would bet this is probably what they're going to do, just because it's the path of least resistance, is everyone knows Sam Ersson has won the job. However, because he is waiver exempt, they can just send him down for a couple days while they're sorting out the Sandstrom situation, and then either tomorrow or the next day or whatever, waive Sandstrom. If he clears, then you send him down, bring Ersson back up, boom, there's your 23-man roster. That's the only change you had to make. That very well might be what they're planning to do, because I don't think they would straight up lie to Sam Ersson, who has been told, you are the backup. Like, I just don't see that as being an option. The other option is, if they are so dead set on making sure they don't lose Felix Sandstrom, they could roll with 3 goalies to start the year. They could keep Ersson up. They could choose not to risk waiving Sandstrom, and they could send down one of the 3 kids. Now, Igor Zamula is like Sandstrom. Igor Zamula is on this roster.
Exempt.
He's not waiver exempt, so he is making this team. If he was not going to make the team, he would have had to have been waived yesterday, because even if they were to put him on waivers today, and they didn't because that's already been announced, he wouldn't be cleared by the time the 5 p.m. roster deadline hits. So Zamula is safe. He's on the 23-man. That leaves Tyson Foerster, Bobby Brink, and Emil Andrae. Now, to me, if any of those 3 guys get sent down, I would think that means they're not on the team. Like, if Ersson is the one who gets sent down...
Because you could have done this whenever.
Exactly. To me, if Ersson's the one that gets sent down, he's getting called back up as soon as they figure out the Sandstrom situation. If it's one of the other kids, my assumption is that means that one of the other kids isn't making the team. Now, they all went on the team bonding trip, which was Sunday into Monday. So clearly they're all close. Like, they're all, if one of these kids doesn't make the team, like,
that's
he's
one.
He's going to come back.
That's the one thing I read was just a couple people commented, like, they just wanted Andrae to get a taste of the NHL, be on the team bonding trip, like, and now it's going to be, but like, he could still go on the trip. It's not like that's an official roster. Like, only your roster guys can go golfing.
Yeah, right.
Like, anyone could go golfing. This isn't an NHL sponsored
thing. It's your trip. You make the rules.
Like, I could have gone if they wanted me to. You know, I don't need a contract to do it. It seems as if it's gonna be paper move Urson, and they do have this. The Lightning play on opening night. They play Tuesday. They're the first game against the Predators in that triple header, and the Flyers don't play till Thursday.
Right.
So you would assume Tampa has this sorted out by today, tomorrow.
Unless they're just going to stick with their guys. I mean, because they do have 2 goalies. They're just internal guys who are unproven and whatever. So maybe that's ultimately what they're going to do. They've decided that, like, because they could have taken Martin Jones, and we're familiar with Martin Jones. He's nothing special, but he's an NHL goalie.
He's played in the league.
They could have claimed him. He wasn't on a super expensive contract. They chose not to. So maybe they are just going to stick with their guys, and maybe all these NHL teams, like, because the other teams that have goalies, that have 3 goalies still on the roster, we have Arizona, Buffalo, Detroit, and Montreal. So there are other teams that are playing this, oh, God, we don't want to send our goalie down and waive him because he might get taken. Oh, shit. Well, you know, maybe Tampa's just playing a game on everyone, and it turns out that they're perfectly happy with rolling with their guys for 2 months.
That would be my bet. My bet would be that Tampa's just trolling us. And if you want to place such a bet, you should do it at DraftKings Sportsbook. I don't think you can bet on whether the Tampa Bay Lightning are trolling us.
Get on that, DraftKings.
Yeah, but maybe if you contact customer service, they'll put it up for you. Things are heating up in the ballpark. Every team is playing to finish the season strong and make it to the playoffs. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you won't miss a moment of the baseball action. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on baseball. Plus, all customers can take a crack at sweet payday with DraftKings same-game parlays. String together multiple bets from a single game for your shot at a major payout. So what are you waiting for? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code PHLY. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on baseball. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PHLY. The crown is yours. 1-800... no. Nope. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill and Casino and Resort, licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. All right, we got an answer on that. This one says Ontario. See dkng.co/baseball for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Should have read the new one prior to reading it out loud.
Yeah, that was rough.
That's a professionalism issue on my part.
Disappointing to you. I might have to take back over the ad reads.
You might have to take them over, Charlie.
I don't want to take over the ad reads.
We're at 24. If you had to bet, is it paper move with Urson?
That seems like where they're going with this because, again, why would you still have these kids up if they're not going to make the team? Why would you waive Wade Allison if they're not going to make the team? You wouldn't have had to. Like, you wouldn't have had to waive Wade Allison if the ultimate plan was to just send down Emil Andrae, because then you could have just kept him as the 14th forward for a while. Or if the original plan was to send down Tyson Foerster, like, it would be a little confusing if they ultimately just send down one of the skater kids, because it would be like, okay, why did you risk losing Wade Allison? And then it just becomes the only explanation I could possibly think of in terms of that, of explaining that, would be Or do they just want to give Wade Allison a fresh start somewhere else? That would be the only thing I could think of.
Were they hoping he'd get claimed in this, like, whatever the issue is between the coach and player, the organization and player? Oh, God, he's still here. Like, like maybe that's their...
But you brought this up before the show, and I think there might be some truth to this, is the idea that we were surprised last week of how blunt Tortorella and how open Tortorella was about the idea of, like, look, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Sam's our number 2. Felix is our number 3. He's just going to stick around for a while.
His openness in that answer might have just been preempting
this.
They sent him down, and what are they doing with sending down this guy who's clearly better than the other one? It's like, because this is roster management. He's going to go down. He's never actually going to drive to Lehigh. Like, that's who was it who did the back and forth? Like, was it Justin Bailey?
Justin Bailey was doing the back and forth.
I always thought it would be funny if you had to, like, go and clock in and then actually, like, drive back. But no, you don't actually have to make the trip. It's just on paper, and then by Thursday they figure this thing out, and Urson's dressed for game 1.
He goes on the trip on Wednesday to Columbus, and everything's fine. That's what I would guess, but we'll see. We're going to find that out in a couple hours.
All right, we're going to find out some answers to some questions now, Charlie, because I have planned it correctly. If Mailbag Monday is going to be a thing, I should probably allot time for it before the final 6 minutes of the show.
Love that.
So we're going to do it in segment 2 here. We're going to answer some questions, some mailbag questions that we got from Twitter.
All right.
We're going to start out with Fly Guy 7. He asks, with the Flyers seemingly planning to keep quite a few kids on the roster despite a full lineup, what are your opinions on cycling kids into NHL games from the practice squad versus calling kids up from the AHL as needed for NHL games? Seems Brink and Andrae may be utilized sparingly. And I guess the question is, what does sparingly mean?
Yeah. I think,
like, if it's once a week, that's not good. But if it's they play 2 out of every 3 and it's mixed and matched, I can live with it.
Exactly. I think, to me, it really, and this is maybe like the 15th time we've said this so far on the show, it really just depends on how much you trust John Tortorella and the organization to pull off this rotation. Because it looks like, at least with Foerster and Brink, they're going to try to do it to start something of like, one plays one game, one plays the other. However, what happens if in that first game, Bobby Brink scores 2 goals? Like, Tyson Foerster probably ain't coming in for game 2. And then if game 2 becomes game 5, then what are we doing here? Then you got to send the guy down, because we don't want these guys sitting. We want them playing. But if they can execute on a plan where they're playing most of the time, and they're getting days off here and there, but they're still playing the majority of the games, or at least 50% of the games, I'm cool with it. If it starts getting to the point where a guy is sitting for a week, you got to send him down.
Yeah. Especially when
ideally, to me, the answer isn't you got to send him down. The answer is get him in a friggin' game.
Yes,
but if the two possibilities are he doesn't play at all and he stays up practicing with the team and he goes down to the AHL and plays, then I'd rather be down in the AHL and play.
Because listen, it's not exactly apples to apples because goaltenders are different. But we saw them last year go, Erson's better, but we need him to play all the time. Yeah. So Sandstrom's the backup.
Exactly.
And now it's, okay, well, I think that part of his development's over. We can get him into enough games where it makes sense. But we have these kids, and we're just not sure how it's going to shake out. What they've told us to this point has been agreeable. It's been optimistic. Like, we're going to get them in, and some vets are going to sit, and we're going to figure this thing out. It's just... when they start out 2-0 and suddenly Tortorella's like, I'm going to the fucking playoffs. And we have no idea if that's going to be what he's thinking, but it is kind of the mindset that they have taken in these situations in the past where it's, sorry, we can't get the kids in. I don't know what to tell you. Like, what you can tell me is play them. But we'll see. Right now, I'm choosing to be optimistic that they have this scheduled out in their heads like we hear about, like with days off and the way you line up pitching in baseball. Like to start the season, the manager already knows like when his second, like, Bryson Stott's not going to play game 8. Like he already knows, so perhaps they already have it mapped out, or at least a rough draft of an idea. But it's the Flyers. Mark Stahl might play 82 games.
Guess we'll find out.
From JFT Marini. He wants to know some player comparables, which is always fun.
Oh, I hate that. I'll try.
Like example, if Mishkov hits his ceiling, who in the NHL does he resemble? Same for Gauthier, Bonk, Brink, etc. Mishkov's the most fun, so I want to start out there. We've heard a lot of different ones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it feels like a cop-out just because they're countrymen.
You're going to go with a Russian.
But, like, Kirill Kaprizov, like, a more of a goal-scoring Kirill Kaprizov is probably decent. But I think we actually asked Briere, I believe, after the draft, like, who would you compare Michkov to? And I think Briere probably answered it the best way, where he's just like, he's so good that he's not somebody you compare. You don't compare him to other players. You think he has a ceiling where other players are getting compared to him. And I think that's the truly exciting part about Mitch.
That's the type of shit you say and get yourself a GM.
Yeah, job. Right.
I could see how he got hired. Going into the draft, I saw a lot of Kucherov. And
yeah, I've seen that too.
And that's, I mean, dude won an MVP at an all-time points season.
Yeah.
He's incredible. But whenever you see that, it's like...
And some of it's fair.
Oh, yeah, a Russian to a Russian, huh?
But some of it's fair because there is a style that Russian
grow up playing the same way.
Yeah, Russian players have a certain style. They take more risks. They're a bit more creative than players who came up in the North American, grind it out and check like that. Like, there is a different mentality, not for every Russian player, but for a lot of them. And I think Michkov has that mentality of, I'm going to create, and if that means, I might not play the best defense on a few shifts, hey, you know what? I'm going to score a ton of goals, so it's worth it. So I do think that it's not just the easy comparison. There is a reason why Russian players tend to get compared to Russian players, and it's not just laziness, but it is a little laziness.
Yeah. No, like, we see it in other sports with different... different stereotypical, it just happens. Gauthier, Bonk, Brink, anyone stand out?
I don't really have any for Bonk, but
Brink seems to me like
I have a name for Brink.
Slow Giroux.
Yeah, Slow Giroux I could see. I mean, I don't hate the Marchessault comparison, although Marchessault is a little bit more of a goal. Like
I was gonna say more of a scorer,
more of a goal guy, but I don't hate it. Like, they're both not the fastest, but super skilled with the puck. Mm-hmm. They're both obviously very small. Bonk, honestly, with Bonk, I just haven't watched him enough.
I saw Brett Pesce today.
I mean, that'd be cool. I would love that. I just haven't watched Bonk enough to really have a read on, like, who he reminds me of. Gauthier, I mean, I think Gauthier plays a bit more physical, and obviously this guy was a significantly better skater, but like the Jeff Carter one, I've heard that.
That's fun.
I don't hate it. Like, goal-scoring center who can play the wing if and when you need him to, but like a straight line type of game. Now, Carter was a plus skater. Gauthier
was fast.
Gauthier is a good skater for his size. Mm-hmm. Carter was a great skater for any size.
Yeah.
So it's not perfect.
That's the lazy the lazy thing came out about Carter because it looked like he wasn't trying and he was actually flying.
He was just an amazing skater, period.
He did not need to like really dig to get by someone.
Exactly.
So is he even trying to get back? Like, well, he got back, so probably.
Yeah, he did. He just didn't look like he was giving the effort. There was a bit of Mike Schmidt to Jeff Carter's game where like Mike Schmidt could make the play without diving in the dirt, so who cares? But some Philly fans did.
Well, that's why I had the Mike Richards jersey. I need you to bring that lunch pail. From Tart and Soul, should we absolutely be trying to trade either or Atkinson/Lawton for a D prospect or picks as soon as possible? We need room for Foerster and Brink. Our timeline is at least a couple of years out. We have high-end forwards coming. We need high-end D. Do those two bring that type return?
This is a very this question is basically like every other tweet on my Twitter feed right now because everybody just wants to trade everybody. Trade him. You can't trade Atkinson yet. I'm sorry. You can't. Can't do it. He needs
especially if you're talking about some sort of high-end return.
He needs to show for at least a few months that he is the Cam Atkinson of old and that he can stay healthy. That's number one. Lawton
isn't getting traded.
I mean, look, I understand the argument why you should trade Scott Lawton. If they had that kind of offer that was rumored in the summer, it would have not been like, I'm not going to say they should have because I am still on the, I get the value of having a Lawton in your lineup.
I get why they didn't, and I'm not even saying it's wrong. From my perspective, That culture is important. Absolutely. We've talked about it time and time over. The assets are equally or more important. The best players is the best thing. If he's going to bring you back considerably more than he is worth, you should have done it. But I get why they didn't.
My perspective on the Lawton thing is I personally am completely fine with them just having Lawton as the culture guy who shows the kids the way and that being his role. My issue is I don't think you need like 5 of them, and they went out and they got a bunch more. And it's like if you're not going to trade Lawton, do you really need Mark Stahl? Do you really need Garnet Hathaway? And I like Garnet Hathaway. I'm personally happy they got Garnet Hathaway because it's going to make my job more fun because he's a fun player to watch. But I don't know how many of these culture guys, like, did you really need to keep Nick Sealer? That to me, like, I'm fine with Lawton being the guy you keep. But in that case, do you need that many more of those guys? That was my issue. That said, I don't think they're going to trade Scott Lawton. I think if they were going to trade him, they would have traded him in the summer. They didn't. Also, I don't think this is the time to trade Scott Lawton. If you've made the decision, we got to trade Scott Lawton now, you do that at the deadline when a bunch of teams convince themselves that Scott Lawton is the missing piece.
Yes.
And you get a boatload for him. Right now, like, Wade Allison's a useful player and no one claimed him. Like, everybody is you know how it is in fantasy football when you spend your first 2 weeks like roster baiting? Mm-hmm. That is what every GM is doing right now. No one is like, I need Scott Lawton right now. They're like, hey, that guy who just made the team, he could be our Scott Lawton. I don't need to trade a first-round pick for Scott Lawton when we have our own. Then they find out in 2 months that guy who they thought could be their Scott Lawton can't actually play. And then 3 of their guys get hurt over the course of the season. And then they're the second seed in the Central, and they're thinking, man, if we want to win it all, we need a Scott Lawton. That's when you trade Scott Lawton, not now.
It just seems like he is the exact guy teams look for at the deadline and overpay for. And we all go like, really? Yeah. That's what they got for him?
Exactly.
And like, who was the dude Tampa gave up a first for from that? Tanner Jeannot?
Tanner Jeannot, yeah. Well, Tanner Jeannot is more of a fighter, but going with like the Barclay Goudreau, Blake Coleman, like that's the type of player.
Previous types of guys. I'm just like, oh yeah, you know what teams look for? Playoff style guys.
It sure is,
and that's going to be Scott Lawton. Where were we here? From SG, bunch of numbers. It's just like a whole bunch of numbers. But it wasn't a bad one. First, idea for merch for the next great Flyers team, a shirt with Matvey, Cutter, Tippett, and Gritty as Mount Rushmore. Man, now Gritty can't be on it. That really limits our audience. But after that, where'd the question? If Kosov tears up the KHL and they trade Hart, do you think Kosov slats in as Erson's backup next year, or the two fight it out in camp?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and this is, I honestly don't think this question needs a lot of analysis. Yeah. We know that Kosov is coming over next year, or at least that is the plan. If Hart is not on the team for one reason or another, and Ersson has established himself as a clear-cut NHL goalie, Kosov is going to be in the mix. I mean, you're talking about a guy who is already a decent KHL goalie, who may be in the midst of taking the leap. He had a really, really good week last week. If he does take the leap into legitimately really good KHL goalie, yeah, he absolutely will be in the mix in camp next year, to be sure.
Agreed. From our old buddy Eamon at Gin and Juicy, who on the Flyers roster? UC, I guess.
UC.
Gin and UC.
Yes,
yeah, that's the joke.
It is a
UC Sorrows joke. Yeah. Who on the Flyers roster is a legitimate fantasy hockey option this season? Neither of us are big fantasy guys.
Yeah, I don't play fantasy hockey.
The one forward who made the top 100 list on the Athletic or wherever it came from was Travis Konechny. Have to believe he's going to pick up a bunch of points. Yeah, I'm sure he's fantasy relevant.
I think Owen Tippett has sleeper potential. Yeah. You know, if Jim Jackson's right and he has 40-goal potential, you can fit that on any team, even if you're as long as you're willing to deal with the bad plus-minus, which you probably will have. To me, those two, maybe Couturier, but I don't know.
And I have to defer. I'd have to defer to boss man Vince on this one. He's got Delorier and says he's
penalty minutes
really underrated because of hits and penalty minutes.
If that's the league you're in, sure.
So, all right. From I can't read that. Ekman Sonahoj 12. Will Couturier return to form and be productive again, or does it look like he has lost speed and quickness that will make that impossible?
I'm going to say he does not look like he has lost speed and quickness. That said, he was never fast to begin with.
And that's always what made me optimistic about his comeback was like, well, he never needed that to start.
Yeah.
He's all about angles and being smart and being in the right place. And he never had foot speed. He is a slow skater.
Yeah.
But he makes up for it. So I was always kind of optimistic that he'd be able to get back to some level. Now, will he be the guy who won the Selke 2019-20? I don't know. But I do think he'll be good.
Yeah, I think right now what he's been missing has just been
the sharpness.
The hands. He's a step behind in terms of making plays with the puck. You're hoping that comes back eventually. You're hoping it comes back soon. But it hasn't yet, so we'll see. We'll see if it comes back.
From Corey Long, are the Flyers more likely to finish 17th to 24th or 25th to 32nd in the standings this year?
I think they're more likely to finish in the bottom 7.
You're far more down on what this team could be, but every time I start thinking, oh no, this might be like a team in that.
Look, they could finish in that 17
I just look
to 24.
at that blue line and
I just
go,
think
how?
they're more likely to finish in the bottom 7.
I look at that blue line and go, how? Like, how could they possibly be better than I think they are when I look at this group of defensemen and none of them are better than a second pair guy.
Yeah.
And that's a stretch for a lot of them.
And you're going to have a lot of young guys probably making mistakes.
I guess it depends on if they start out better, if they have a better first half than we're expecting. And we talked about this on Friday. Like, how does that affect the organization's mindset? Are we going to play more of the veterans and just try to grind out some 2-1 games and win that way? Or is there going to be that concerted effort to go, yeah, Andrae makes a ton of mistakes. Also, he's going to play more because it's more important that he play than we get bounced in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's already more important that he play than we get bounced in the first round.
That is absolutely way more important. It's just, are Torts and Danny going to have the stomach for that? If it's like, we can make it, we might be able to make it. Like, and that's it. Before we answer some more of these questions, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you about my friends at FOCO, because FOCO is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. And they have the absolute best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. Listen, tailgating, football season, we know what time of the year it really is. It's Red October. You got to get your overalls. That's right. They have the overalls at FOCO and so much more. Hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for game day. I'm seeing these ticket prices. People are going to these games. It's going to be an absolute blast. You want to look your best at the Phillies playoffs, and the only way to do that, you got to shop at FOCO. FOCO has hooked up PHLY and provided some awesome pieces for our sets, and they always have our back as Philly sports fans. They have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in the description of the show. For all non-presale items, use code PHLY for 10% off. That's code PHLY for 10% off. FOCO. Get your overalls.
Get your overalls.
Let's get through a couple more of these questions here. Just the idea from Derek Flylander. He's just asking about the Ottawa situation. What's going on with Pinto? What's going on with Matthew Joseph? It looks like they're going to start the year without Pinto and without Josh Norris as well. Very interesting, but do you think the Flyers are still keeping an eye? And how is that? Is that just, we talked about this, but would it then be, sorry, Bobby,
probably
we gotta send you down for a month?
Yeah, and that's fine.
Could that be part of the roster issue right now?
What's clearly going on here is the Flyers are basically saying, look, here's our price.
Give us something.
Here's our price.
Yeah.
We're not taking this guy on for a second-round pick. He's got 3 more years left on his deal. You got to give us something serious. It's a small cap hit. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's just,
but it's a roster spot.
It's a roster spot, yeah, and you got to pay up.
And we have kids like.
Yeah.
Sitting Brink for a month is worth something now.
Exactly.
He was going to make this team.
It's an opportunity cost.
Do you think this potentially is one of the things the goalie situation is probably first and foremost, but it's one of the reasons they haven't made the full decision yet.
No, I don't think so.
They're just waiting until the end.
Because the thing is that if they were to make a trade, it would be very easy with guys like Brink and Foerster, just to send them down in a second. Like, these guys they're waiver exempt. You could do it whenever the hell you want. So if Ottawa calls up in 10 minutes and says, yeah, we'll give you a first-round pick to take on Matthew Joseph, then they could do the deal and then 30 seconds later send Bobby Brink down or send Tyson Foerster down. I don't think that's complicating things. I don't think they're waiting on Ottawa. I just think they've made it clear to Ottawa what it's going to cost for them to do business with them, and so far Ottawa has said no. So, okay.
I forgot I did this. From @Philadelphia1.
Oh, this is actually you.
What's your stance, no pun intended, on locker room floor logos? I guess there's some sort of incident in Chicago recently that brought up the whole logo thing on the floor. Where do you stand on this?
Let me put it this way. I am very, very glad that the Flyers are one of the teams that puts their logo on the ceiling, so I don't have to worry about it. It's just one of those stupid things. Is it dumb? Yeah, it's dumb. But it's hockey. There's so many dumb things in hockey. As journalists, we can afford to handle one dumb thing that affects us.
It is very much yes, if you're being smart, just if you don't want it stepped on, put it on the ceiling. I get that logic. But like, that's the point, is it's something for the team. Like, you are mindful of it and you are respectful of it, and it's a bonding thing, and it's bigger than you. Like the Herb Brooks, you play for the name on the front, not on the back, all that shit. That's fine for the team, but like, put a tarp over it when the media comes in. Like, for someone who doesn't work for the team, whose the logo doesn't pay their paychecks, who don't wear that sweater every day. Yeah, put a tarp over it, put like movie stanchions around it, like whatever you need to do.
I do have to think that part of it, and like, this is maybe me being...
It's them being assholes.
No, this is me being cynical, is that it gives them an excuse
to be mad,
to yell at a journalist.
Yes, 100%.
It's an acceptable reason to yell at a journalist.
It is all fine for the team to have this tradition, and I believe in it. If you don't want it stepped on, mark it off. Do something because the journalists have shit to do. I see both sides, and I'm all for. It's just like, for this particular time, rope it off. It's very easy to do. There are teams that like put a mat down over it. There are teams that do. I don't get asking someone who isn't on the team to abide by this rule. Like, whatever. From Flyers fan 39, what is the timeline / strategy for fixing our blue line? Seems like the weakest part of our lineup, and that coincides with the question earlier. Should they be trading someone, Lawton or Atkinson, to maybe acquire that D-man? They have 2 first-round picks coming up. We assume, unless they're picking first, Ty is going to go to defense. Yeah, I'd never want to pick for need, but at a certain point, you are going to need some defensemen. Also, I just keep thinking about this. When the team is contending, hopefully their best player is on an entry-level contract in his prime. That allows you to go spend money on a defenseman. How one becomes available, how you go about it, it's difficult, but we just saw Vegas do it with Pietrangelo. We've seen this happen before. We saw the Flyers do it in previous years. They go out and get a Chris Pronger. It costs you some assets, but you're so stocked you can spend those assets. That's what it's going to be for me. It's just, when does that opportunity present itself? When's it appropriate? We won't know that until the time comes.
The short answer is, I think it's going to take a while. And I think they know that. I think they know that restructuring the blue line is a long-term project. Like, Oliver Bonk, the organization's super high on him. He's going to spend 2 more years in juniors. I think their best case scenario for him is that he doesn't spend any time in the AHL, that when he turns pro, which would be after he spends 2 more seasons with London, that he jumps right to the NHL. And that's possible. He might do that. But we're still talking about this year and next year of not having him. Cam York is potentially going to be part of it. Travis Sanheim might have to be part of it, especially if he's not willing to waive his no-trade clause.
There's 3 or 6.
So there's 3 of your 6, but that's not until 3 years down the road. And then, you're hoping that maybe Ronnie Attard is a good third pair defenseman. Maybe Igor Zamula is something. Maybe Emil Andrae is something. And if a couple of those guys hit, suddenly the timeline, it gets expedited. But you still, number one, you still need that
You
alpha.
still need the one.
You still need that number one. And number two, there's no guarantee that Andrae, Zamula, Adder, Grons, all those guys, no guarantee that any of those guys pan out. We hope they will. No idea they pan out. So this is going to be a process, absolutely. I would say we're talking like 3, 4, 5 years down the road before we maybe can say the Flyers have a legitimate cup contending defense. It's going to take a while.
That's a long time.
Sure is.
I might not be alive.
I hope you are.
And finally, the last question of our mailbag today. Alex at Flyers Hockey Fan. So you're the one. Who's going to be the captain?
Oh, my God.
JK, in all seriousness, who is going to wear a letter this season, and what do you think it'll – and do you think it'll be more than one person, or will Torts stick with Laughton?
No, it's just Laughton for now.
I did see – and
I think
Cap-Friendly –
it's just Laughton for now.
Cap-Friendly isn't always right, but they do have an A next to Couturier as well.
Maybe Couture. We haven't – look, this is something that, again –
He's so sick of asking. Everyone's afraid.
No, I don't give a shit.
I know.
Like, I don't give a shit. Because Torts doesn't give a shit. So it's just not something I'm going to burn a question on. And I know that a lot of fans really do care, and I'm sympathetic to that. Like, I just don't. When there's a captain, I'll care. But it's not that important to me if they have one guy with an A versus two guys with an A. We'll find out on opening night. Sorry.
And if you think someone deserves it, will it into existence. You know, I bought a Mike Richards jersey with a C on it while he was still an alternate captain. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Make that person the captain. You know,
I'm
you.
So sick of the captaincy question. It's infuriating.
It's why I keep asking it. So you did write that piece on Dan Hilferty and this new era of orange.
Yes.
Read it earlier this morning.
Check that out at allphly.com.
Allphly.com. Charlie, excellent work as always. My biggest takeaway, we're just going to get into this. I get him. Like, I disagree that the way to go about reshaping the Flyers, creating a new era of orange, was to go, we're running it back.
Well, not really. Well, running it back with younger former
That's
Flyers.
not what they did. Continue the strategy of we hire people we know. I don't agree with that. Now, a lot of this show since we started has been like framing the debate as, well, this is what they're doing.
Yeah.
So this is how they make it work. And so I think a lot of times people are like, well, you guys are just out here saying what the organization... No, like, this is what the organization is doing. So that's what I'm going to comment on. If this was what would Bill do with the organization, 11 people would watch because I have no say. So my opinion doesn't really freaking matter in terms of this stuff. But no, like... I wouldn't have gone with Briere and Jonesy, probably. I would have gone with some dude no one's ever heard of from Sweden. Yeah, because that's something we've never tried before. But this is what they chose to do. Just in terms of the scope of this article, what did you take away from your conversation with Hilferty and Jonesy?
Yeah, well, the two big things that I took from it was that, number one, I don't think they went into this with the intention of being like, okay, we're definitely hiring former Flyers. I do think that it was incredibly important to them through this whole process to emphasize on reconnecting with the fans. And I think they ultimately, number one, I think the Briere thing, while the former Flyerness is what got him in the door originally, I do think that a lot of that was he's here, he's a top prospect, he happens to be a former Flyer, and Hilferty got to know him, was like, this dude's really smart. I want him as my GM. Why are we going to let him leave? I think that was part of it. I think another part of it, too, was that they knew he could work with Torts. They wanted to keep Torts. Whereas if you bring in another GM with an ego, might not want the holdover coach still coaching the team. So it was a double thing. It was, number one, we have a GM who we think is smart, who's already a top GM prospect that other teams want. We know that. And it's a GM we believe can interact in a positive way with the coach, who sometimes is not easy to interact with in a positive way. So the Briere thing, that was to me more of dealing with the circumstances at hand. Hiring Jonesy, though, it's very clear that a lot of that was them trying their best to start this reconnection with the fan base. And the argument that I've made on this show, that I think you've made on this show, is that, look, really, if the team starts winning, people are going to come back, and if some people don't come back, they're going to be replaced by a ton of younger people who just want to watch a winning team that aren't going to care that, that all the former Flyers aren't working for the team anymore. However, there are a significant portion, maybe not a majority, but there's a lot of people who that really matters to. And I think the way they're looking at it is we to get this back to the way we want it to be, we want to bring everyone back in. We don't want anyone to feel like they're being ostracized, like they're not being valued. And that's the alumni, that's the Snyder family, that's all the old season ticket holders, all the old fans. And we also want these smart young minds who have seen the changes in the game to be able to bring in the younger fans who don't really care that much about that. They just want to see a goddamn winning hockey team. So I think a lot of this is them trying to Big Ten it as much as possible. And that's what they feel like hiring Jonesy in particular allows them to do.
I get that argument. I just think a lot of that contingent of Flyers fan is unsalvageable because the game has changed so much. What they want doesn't exist. We need to be the bullies. Well, you can't. I'm sorry. We got Delorier. How many fights did he get in last year? Wasn't 82? Yeah. You don't fight every game. You definitely don't fight multiple times every game. There is just something to the business side of, the Flyers never needed a mascot before. Well, they fucking do now. Get over it. I don't know. The other night when I texted you is the DJ, you did the story about still the DJ, because I'm watching the game on TV and I hear NWA Express Yourself. And I'm like, shit, yeah. And I just assume a lot of those people who want Bobby Clark running things still are like, well, this is an AC/DC, so I hate it. And it's not as if NWA is new, but the shit you listen to, they play is new. Yeah. They're not going to like that.
In all honesty, that contingent doesn't even want AC/DC playing. They don't want any music playing. they would rather it all just be the organ because that's what they remember.
I would think, be for the organ.
But I think for me, it's less about in an ideal world, I want everyone to be involved.
Absolutely.
I want everyone to feel welcome. I want every person who at one time has liked the Flyers to be a Flyers fan. My concern about this has always been, and this was the concern I expressed last season, this is the concern I expressed when the hires were made, and it's still the concern that I have, is I worry that if you're emphasizing this thing of the people we hire have to know what it means to be a Flyer. They have to have a connection with the local market. They have to know that because that's going to get us back to where we were. I worry that you are choosing not to hire people who could potentially be better at the jobs than the artificially smaller hiring pool of people who you think can be good at the jobs and are capable of communicating that to the fans and making everybody feel like they belong. Now, in the end, you might get the worst of both worlds, which is you hire somebody. And again, I like Chuck Fletcher personally, but Chuck Fletcher was not great at communication with the fans. And also his only direct connection with the Flyers was he was friends with Clark. So you can get the best, the worst of both worlds by trying to go outside the organization. However, I do worry that, look, they might have lucked out big time. And maybe Danny Briere is the hotshot GM who's going to make all the right moves.
It's worked before. We're seeing former players of
absolutely
teams.
Has.
It's worked in LA. It happens.
Yeah, and maybe Keith Jones is going to do an amazing job providing insight and being that balancing force in the room between Tortorella and Briere. It's possible, and as someone who wants to cover a really good team, I really hope that's the way it plays out. I just worry that by emphasizing this, the importance of connection and understanding Philadelphia, that you're letting other teams hire the truly best people. And in truth, I don't know. I don't know.
No one knows.
So it's very possible that maybe they truly did hire the two best people who just also happen to be very connected to the Flyers in multiple ways. And I hope that's the case. I just worry that you're artificially limiting the hiring.
It just seems like you're reducing your chances of finding the next great one. Just real quick on this. What's the biggest difference you've noticed, if any, between the Dave Scott regimes, I guess the previous two with Dave Scott at the helm, and now? Is there a difference for you, just in the way things are presented?
Yeah, I think the big difference, truthfully, is the communication style, the access, the transparency. I mean, Dan Hilferty, say what you will about him, about Comcast, about Independence Blue Cross, and all that stuff. It's very clear that he wants to put himself front and center in a way that Dave Scott either never was willing to or was never comfortable doing. Like, we only saw Dave Scott a few times, really. Dan Hilferty, the third day of training camp, was down, like literally just mingling with the fans in the crowd at the practice facility in Voorhees. He's told me he plans to be out in the concourse, shaking hands and saying hi to people and listening. And that's new.
And he might buy you a beer, just like he did for the Broad Street Hockey draft party.
No, but
I really like that you led with that. That was cool.
It's a great story, but it shows you, like, they are. I think the biggest difference between the Hilferty run organization versus the Scott run organization is that it's very clear the Hilferty run organization is trying. Now, whether that trying ultimately means anything in terms of building a better team, we'll see. But they're trying to engage the fans more, because the way they look at it, and this is a big thing too, is just that, and this is a cynical way to look at it, but honestly, these are business people. I'm sure they're looking at it this way. It is true, in my opinion, that if you get a good hockey team, all the other stuff isn't going to matter that much.
Absolutely.
People are going to want to win. They're going to want to watch a winner. They're going to want to get excited. They're going to want to be around play. Like, look at the Sixers. The Sixers, for years, were honestly kind of pieces of shit to the fans. They really were. They were not, they didn't give much access. They basically were arrogant and kind of said and did whatever they wanted, but people wanted to be a part of them because they were good and they won and they had stars. Now that it doesn't look like they're going to win that much, now people are turning on them a bit. The problem is that the Flyers know they're embarking on a rebuild. They know that this isn't going to be fixed overnight. And if they had done let's turn the page completely, let's shut out the alums, let's get rid of the senior advisors, they've already seen what that does. That leads to a ton of disgruntled people that were formerly associated with the organization complaining, writing articles about how things have changed, how it's a disgrace, how they're not living up to the legacy of Ed Snyder.
And people then say that's why they're bad.
Exactly. And my point is that I don't think it was would necessarily have been a smart move to allow that to be the narrative of the rebuild. To allow
that makes a lot of sense.
We're shutting out all the old people because we're turning the page, and then suddenly all the publicity around the Flyers is negative because it's a bunch of people who are disgruntled and who just want to yell and complain, rightfully, that they're no longer part of this. Instead, you have all those people on your side. They're all pumping the tires of the organization rather than trying to take shots on their way out. And the hope, I think, is that it gives them a little bit more leeway to embark on a rebuild that isn't going to produce a winning team right away.
And that is all the time we have for you on PHLY Flyers today. We will get to this hypothetical of the day tomorrow. We don't need to do hypothetical of the day on Mailbag Day.
Did you do a third ad read?
Shit.
I think you should do that.
You're right. You are absolutely right, Charlie. And, tonight, I am so lost now. I had the wrong ad copy opened, and now I have to go to the Game Time thing. Here we go.
There we go.
Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Yeah, the Phils are still away. And I remembered that like halfway through saying tonight. It's like, no, not even that.
Not even that.
We just have to read this cold. All right, and that is all the time
that is
we have
truly
for
all
you
the time we have
on PHLY Flyers today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for hanging out. If you haven't already, you got to hit that subscribe button. Search Broad Street. This is not a banner show for me.
No, this is one of your best.
PHLY Flyers, wherever there are podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube page. My name is Bill Matz for Charlie O'Connor. Thankfully, this is over.
We all silly like the mayor.